Deacon Mark Campbell here with Tim Glemkowski, and if his name is familiar to you, it could be for this huge event we had just this past summer. I know as I've been telling people about this this conversation that we were going to have, you know, it was ringing some bells with people. But as soon as I said National Eucharistic Congress, like, oh yes,
that guy.
Yeah. So I want to just jump into that real quick with you, if you would. You've had just a few months now to reflect on that event. I know you went right to work for Amazing Parish. Yeah. But what has been the fruit that you've seen, or as you look back upon that historic event, what are your thoughts, feelings, emotions in and around that experience? Yeah,
personally, I think just very humble to be part of something that God did that was so powerful for the church. The stories that have come back are remarkable. I mean, we had some pretty powerful, like physical healings take place while we were there. Certainly a lot of stories of conversion, priests who have reached out that said that they were, you know, really agonizing in their priesthood and thinking about leaving, and that have been recommitted to their vocation even as a result of it. I think the broader thing is, I think in some senses it's a bellwether to the church and an image to the church of the kind of fruitfulness God wants us to have, that he's doing something in our time around revival. And I think it was very unifying in a lot of ways, but also challenging to sort of say, this is where we get our life from, is from Jesus and the Eucharist. And I think God reminded us of that there.
Yeah. And I was there and experienced many of those things just in conversation with people of it was like a giant family reunion with all the cousins you'd never met before.
That's right.
And at the same point in time, this personal encounter with Jesus with, 50, 60,000 of your closest friends, right? It was just really unless you were there, in many ways tough to describe.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad you've gotten some of that feedback. And I imagine just as time goes by, there's going to be more stories and more experiences that people will reveal and share about. What led to you being involved? It was quite an undertaking, obviously, but what led to you being invited to lead this effort as the CEO of the National Eucharistic Congress?
Yeah, no, it's
something that never didn't exist, right? It was a brand new sort of concept that emerged out of the Eucharistic revival, and there you were tabbed with the task of heading it up.
Yeah, I would always I did a lot of the fundraising to support the work. And so a lot of our benefactors would ask, sometimes I'd get to the end of a call or a meeting with them and they'd say, how did you get this job? And I would just, after a while, I just always started saying, have you ever heard of Forrest Gump? It's kind of like that. Like in some ways, the Lord just sort of led us on a journey of my heart, my work has always been in the renewal of the church. And so I'd started some apostolates that were doing work in those areas. And then during COVID, I'd gone to work for Archbishop Aquila in the Archdiocese of Denver. And I'd done a little ghostwriting for the USCCB for a resource that they were coming out with from the Committee on Evangelization the summer before. And it introduced me to Bishop Cousins as he rolled onto the committee. And so we got along well. And so he invited me to be these committees that, the USCCB sort of operates around, have these lay consultants that are just there to basically like talk in meetings and kind of give their perspective on different things. So I came in as they were just starting to talk about this Eucharistic revival project that Bishop Barron had started and that Bishop Cousins was now sort of undertaking. And so when they decided there'd be a Congress that would be sort of the high watermark of this, and that they would form an entity to do all the work of it, I just had a very profound experience of calling, is probably the simplest way to put it. And so I just applied. I reached out to Bishop Cousins and said, I'd like to throw my hat in the ring. I really feel like the word the Lord gave me was, this is the next World Youth Day 1993. This is a great moment for renewal in the church in Denver in 1993. And a lot of the work of the new evangelization was really sparked in this country by that moment. And I think I sensed, in some ways we were very surprised and it exceeded our expectations sort of in every measure. In other ways, like it was a confirmation of some of those early words that the Lord was saying, I want to do something here that's more than just an event, more than just like this kind of gathering of the church. And it was very powerful to be part of.
I'm imagining there was not a long list of people that were willing to throw their name into the hat.
It was very new, and it was not a lot was figured out.
Right,
and
it was still in its conceptual stage, right?
Very much so.
What was going to take place?
Very much so. Yeah, and even to the moment of the Congress, right? In some ways, like we had an opening dinner with a lot of our supporters, and then the bishops, and then we sort of all just walked over. I had a little golf cart and took the kids over to the opening night, and it was one of those things that when the opening night of it, one of our benefactors, I remember, came up to me. We were kind of in a suite together. He had tears in his eyes, like choked up. And he was like, I don't know what I expected, but like, it wasn't this. And I think that was everybody's experience in some ways of like, we kind of got, to the starting line, and then the Lord for 5 days. I think you're right. Like, it's almost hard to describe like what the experience was actually like. My wife even says sometimes we were so busy, I gave like 12 talks that, over 5 days or something like that. And
I think you were at every press conference that I sat.
It was every press conference. It was I was like literally just constantly running. I was at like, I remember I was at 10,000 steps by like 10 a.m. every morning. You know what I mean? Like, it was just crazy. And so it's so busy, but even she'll say like, oh man, I just like would love to go back for like a day. Like, it was just so life-giving. And I think in many ways that was, I think that's the humbling part of it, is it really was just a work of God at the end of the day.
Well, and then from that, there's the ripple effect that takes place, right? The lives that were changed there, then went back into their communities, and now are impacting the lives of others through their witness of faith. And this side of heaven, we'll just never know, right? Like of just how vast the net was cast for to be fishers of men, so to say. Well, I want to go back even further, because it's what led to this calling, and that's a theme that I think we'll hit on here frequently as we talk. Is that you are somebody who appears very docile to the promptings of the Holy Spirit, and is willing to discern and respond to a call. And that really took place at a Franciscan a Steubenville conference in your senior year of high school. Are you willing to talk about that in detail of what that experience was like?
Sure. Yeah. Happy to. Yeah. So I, good Catholic family growing up, right from Chicago, or kind of culturally Catholic. And then my folks had a conversion, and then got to, high school and just kind of fell away, and, like dumb teenager stuff. And I think in some ways like wrestled with the faith, like really felt like it was kind of repressive, and wasn't sure it made a lot of sense. I think more than anything, I just hadn't had like really an encounter with Jesus, or a compelling reason to like, it's countercultural to live Christianity today. It requires like effort, and that effort didn't seem, it didn't seem relevant enough to me to give that effort. And so my mom forced me on a bus to a Steubenville youth conference for my senior year in high school. And simply put, you really heard the gospel message for the first time in a very powerful way. And it conflicted me. Like the question that kind of occurred to me, I think even at that time, sort of living in a life of sin, I think there was an intellectual honesty, at least, to say like, what if this is real? Like, what does that mean? I think formation growing up, like, knew in some ways what that would mean, what it would require. And so really wrestled throughout that weekend, but then Saturday night of those Steubenville youth conferences, an opportunity for adoration. And really in that youth conference had an opportunity to say to Jesus for the first time, like, if you're real, like if this is true, I'm open, and really open my heart in prayer. And very powerful. I think Pope Benedict XVI says being Christian is not the result of an ethical choice or a lofty ideal. It's the fruit of an encounter with a person. And for the first time in my life, God became a person, and he became real. And it did. It really shook me up and kind of changed things ultimately.
Awesome. We're going to take just a short break, but when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Tim Glemkowski. He is the executive director of Amazing Parish.
Yeah.
And that's sort of a brand new role for you, but fits right in with the how the Lord has been setting you up for this work that is. Well, we're going to get into it. It's not easy. When we're talking about revival, it's a word that really comes with some sincere action and planning that needs to take place. We'll talk about what revival looks like to you and what Amazing Parish is doing to do that.
Can't wait.
Welcome back. I am Deacon Mark Campbell, along with Tim Glemkowski, the Executive Director of Amazing Parish. And we're going to talk about that here in just a moment. But as we went into the break, we were talking about your conversion and your experience. And at the Steubenville Franciscan, what do we call those?
Like a youth conference?
Yeah.
Or,
I've never been to one. I've heard great things. In fact, one of the kids that I sponsored through confirmation, he's there now, along with his sister. And I know I've received some formation through diaconate training from there.
Oh, neat.
So familiar from the outside looking in, but witnessing the fruit of it here right now in our conversation with you. And I know you went into a seminary then before you finally settled on the vocation of marriage. But quickly, I mean, this has been your life's work so far: evangelization, renewal. Being a messenger of the gospel. Kind of talk about their early career that led up to the National Eucharistic Congress, which we talked about, and then we'll jump into your work with Amazing Parish.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah. So I think, for me, that question, it's kind of a complicated way of putting it, but the question today is, how do the means of the church become more conformed to her end, right? So the church exists so that all might have life, the life and life to the full that Jesus came to bring. Like every person, the church doesn't so much have a mission. The church is a mission. That's like why it exists, to bring that fruitfulness to all people. And I don't always think the church, right now is accomplishing that mission as fully as she could. So I taught high school theology for a bit, but that's been the through line for everything. I worked at a couple parishes, and then from that experience began just working with other parishes and pastors to sort of say, how do we do this? How do we help parishes be more places that are not just like open up the doors, whoever shows up kind of shows up, but to actually have our mission as central to everything we do.
Well, the temptation, I think, is to try to cookie cutter, one size fits all, plug and play sort of formula. But the nuances from across the United States, and then we'll just take the state of Iowa, where you've got a large city like Des Moines, and then you get in the rural areas, the needs are vastly different within that, but they're all facing some of the same struggles. And that is, how do we communicate the kerygma?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's like core principles, right? It's more golf than it is, like it's more art than science at times, right? Like I think of golf, and it's because it's like you got to think about every shot and what your lie's like and what the wind's like. And I think, across parishes, right? What do we need? We need a healthy culture. So much of the time, the church's greatest obstacle to mission is dysfunction, like organizational dysfunction. And so we need to create a healthy culture, really help the pastor to make a decision to lead, build a healthy team around him, and then, help people encounter Jesus personally, respond to the basic gospel message. We're often talking to people at a place that they're not really at. Like they're not, someone's asking some of the more minute questions that we on the inside are asking about, so they're just wondering, is God real? Does he care? And what does that mean for me if he is and if he does? And so then from there, we have to help every Catholic who is growing in faith and trying to come into a deeper love of Jesus to experience a kind of a secondary conversion of saying, my life was given as a gift to me, but also to the world. And there's some definite purpose that I'm supposed to accomplish in light of that mission that is really about, I'm God's plan A for some person who otherwise might never experience the life and life to the full that Jesus brings. And so those basic principles have to get woven into more of the culture of the Catholic Church in the United States.
That takes us, I think, right now to our next, the chapter in your life and where you're at now. And I imagine that, again, there was some discernment that went into staying with the National Eucharistic Congress, what that would look like, or this opportunity that you have with Amazing Parish. Was that a difficult decision? Or was that something that was made with relative ease and peace?
I think the Lord was very clear for me. Like, my job was to get the first Congress, sort of like this whole movement underway. And so we're going to have future Congresses, and dates for those are coming soon. I can't share too much now. I'm still on the board of directors, and I'm like a special assistant right now. But for me, it was very much so kind of a family decision. I was on the road probably 15 nights a month to kind of get the Congress lifted off the ground. It was a startup in many ways. And the effort that took, the Lord made clear. So about a year before the Congress, I had said to our board of directors and Bishop Cousins, the chairman, like, hey, we got to put a succession plan in place because I'm not going to be here forever. And thankfully, Jason Shanks, who is the COO of the Congress, who kind of got us to the finish line as well too, was able to step into that kind of leader role to take it forward. So no, it was not the Amazing Parish thing was a surprise and a calling itself in terms of that being that specific mission. But I was very aware throughout that, like, I was the fire starter for the Congress, not necessarily the one to get it to. I can't wait to bring my kids. I can't wait to bring my grandkids someday to a National Eucharistic Congress. Be like, Granddad was involved in these.
I can see that now, right? Based on your earlier comments of like, okay, we experienced it from this side. We will actually, the next one we want to experience from
I can't wait to just go.
The stadium,
yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to go and just.
No press conferences, no worrying about needing to be at any certain place at any certain time. Just be there.
Strollers and wagons and just getting around. Yeah. I can't wait. Like legitimately, I think it's going to be such a beautiful movement in the church, but no, a very clear sort of calling in and calling out. So it's been great to get, back to, in some ways, a lot of the work I'd done was more in like the institution. So I'd worked for the Archdiocese of Denver. I'd started this ministry that was working with parishes. And so to get back to it from a slightly different angle, really focused on the fundamental problems, like the pain points that priests experience day in and day out in their leadership, and how to address those first as a place of kind of building the preconditions for mission. But it's a beautiful, Amazing Parish is 11 years old as an organization. It's founded by Pat Lencioni, who's a organizational health guru.
A friend of mine is he's a Pat Lencioni. Like he gobbles up everything.
Aficionado.
He puts out there.
Yeah, so. No, I mean, he's like world famous, right? In terms of devout Catholic. Right. And so he and another businessman, John Martin from Denver, founded this organization to basically help priests. And they've coached like 1,100 pastors. They've had 1,500 pastors at their conferences. So they've had a beautiful impact in the church. And so to get to come in and be part of something that's already experienced so much kind of success and momentum, fits our family schedule a lot better, and still, scratches a lot of my itches to, renew and reform the church. So it's a perfect fit.
Awesome. We'll I think now's a good, we'll just take a little short break here, and then we come back. Let's get into Amazing Parish, what it is. What does renewal look like? We've touched on a couple of those points a little bit, but we'll get into the specifics of how renewal impacts priests, and then the things that provide you, are giving you hope for the future of the church. I'm Deacon Mark Campbell, along with Tim Glemkowski. He was the CEO of the National Eucharistic Congress, which took place in July in Indianapolis. And as we've mentioned, it was a great event. And if you were there, you know exactly what I mean by that. And you might even be experiencing how great it was by the fruits of those who have come back from the experience that they had here. He is now the executive director of Amazing Parish, and we're going to get into that organization and what that work looks like for him today and what his plans are to help with a continued renewal in the life of the church. All right, welcome back. Thanks for making this time for us. I know you're in town to speak at a Forge event, and this opportunity is something I've been looking forward to since Dr. John Bishop made it available. Because again, I was so deeply impacted by the National Eucharistic Congress experience myself. We've spent a lot of time talking about that, but you had announced at the Congress that you were going to be stepping aside. They announced, I believe, a new CEO at the event. So let's talk about Amazing Parish. We've touched on it a little bit. It's been around for 11 years, but obviously they're ready to go next level, because otherwise they would not have invited you to take the helm and lead it to where it's going to go. What visions, what have they done so far well, and what do you hope to build upon? And where do you see the future in the greatest need for renewal that Amazing Parish can fill?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I mean, the sort of Amazing Parish is incredibly effective. And I can say that because it hasn't been a lot of my work that's gotten it to that point. A lot of times, like, we as Catholics see a lot of the external problems of parishes. Like we see stuff closer to our level. I don't think we realize, like, day in and day out, what the life of a priest is often typically like. And priests are, priests today are joining the priesthood because they know they're running into a burning building, right? They know the statistics of decline. They know the difficulties in the church, and they want to be part of the solution. And they want to live a heroic priesthood in many ways. And many of them will admit, right, and studies have shown this, that some of the stuff they get the least amount of formation in is, some of the hard practical skills of, like, business administration. But even more, like, fundamentally than that, they're put in charge as, like, the CEO of a, $2 million a year nonprofit, a couple of years after ordination. One of my buddies here in Iowa,
with deteriorating buildings and
deferred maintenance,
right.
and sometimes staff that don't understand their vision and where they want to go, and they don't know how to build consensus and get things moving in the right direction. I had a buddy here in Iowa who I was in seminary with, who, 11 months after ordination was the pastor of 4 parishes, and the furthest drive between the 4 parishes was an hour and a half apart. So the hidden problem that's happening in the church right now, and it's happening all over, and I don't want to, focus on the negative, but there's a lot of priests that are burning out way younger than you'd expect them to, and opting out of the priesthood, and really, kind of broken circumstances. And so what Amazing Parish really does is comes along the pastor as a leader and helps him build a healthy culture, helps him build a team that can sort of share life with him and leadership, and be accountable for the results of the parish, like change the culture of the staff of the parish, and then get to the pews, then do evangelization, help Catholics become disciples, help disciples go on mission. And so having that really, like, foundational approach to parish renewal, the feedback we hear the most is, one of our pastors I was meeting the other day, I'm like, let me meet our 10 best pastors and have a conversation with them. What do we do well? What do we not do well? And so we're having this conversation. He says, the first thing you need to know is, this is like an all-star pastor, big suburban parish, near a big major Midwestern city. And he said, the first thing you need to know is, like, I probably wouldn't be a priest today without Amazing Parish, before going on to share a lot of both strengths and things we can continue to work on. And so that's all Pat's genius, right? His focus on organizational health and applying those tools to pastors, but fitting them to parish life. It's not just like business principles for the church.
You're bringing in the 6 working geniuses.
The working geniuses, and the 5 dysfunctions of a team, the ideal team player. These models and concepts just help pastors think around how to actually create momentum in their parish. Like, that's what it does, is it helps them. All leadership in the church today is change management, but pastors are often blown away or overwhelmed by the circumstances they find themselves in, and it really just helps them to lead courageously.
Well, and you said that you don't want to focus on the negative, but we have, you have to kind of be honest and upfront about what the problems are before you can begin working towards a solution. So fundamentally, what does that look like then? Is it a parish that reaches out to you specifically and you give them assessment and then you go in and help, or is there a little bit more? Is it more nuanced than that?
Yeah, it's basically we call them the circles of influence, right? So typically it's been very grassroots. It's been basically all like, we haven't done much marketing. It's like pastors reaching out saying, hey, I talked to my brother priest. He said you were super helpful in his parish. It's like, great. And so it's a lot of coaching. We have an annual event called the Summit that has, like 120 parishes that come to as sort of an initial jump or, along the journey, some further energy. But it's a basically 4 to 5 year coaching relationship where we help them work through circles of influence, make the decision to lead courageously, build a team, change the culture of your staff, reach the pews, reach the world. And there's a lot of models and sort of, techniques and conversations and team training that happens in the midst of it. But it's a very much so like a relationship that we have with pastors.
Is it something that ultimately you hope to find your way into seminaries? So they're getting some of this formation, if you will, is a part of their priestly formation of how to build a team, since that's essentially what many of them are being called to do, is, like you say, go in and operate as a CEO of a large nonprofit in many cases.
Yeah, I do. Hopefully. Yeah, I would love to get there, because I do think, there's a reality of some of this training is most effective when you're doing it, right? When you can apply it right away. But we have to at least spin seminarians through, we have to more closely tie some of the formation that happens in seminary to the lived reality of priesthood that they're going to be in on day one. And so to at least survey and spin through some of these concepts of leadership and organizational health. Seminaries do some of it. I think to do a little bit more of it or more systematized would be really beneficial, so that they would at least then have context for some of what the expectations are. Once you're in that role, there's a certain expectation of you that the parish has as a leader. And many times I think that's where the frustration comes in for priests, is they're like, I'm being expected to do something that like no one has prepared me to do fully. So it's probably going to be most effective live once you're actually in that situation as a leader.
You're applying it as sort of on the job training. So
I think so.
Speak, right?
Yeah.
Right. And that makes perfect sense. And I know there are parishes that are using things like the EOS operating system, and things like that. So this sounds like it could be in that vein of helping, again, just formulate some structure and creating vision that people can all then get on board with. The work of renewal itself, so it starts sort of with the pastor itself, then in the staff and all of that. Then how does it trickle down then? What you guys propose into the life of the parish?
Yeah, a lot of it again is about assessing like who do we have and what do they need, right? So it's different in some ways, especially once you get to the pews. I think it gets a little bit less programmatic, like it gets a little bit more. It's very relational. I think
people are very like. When they see something like that, I think there's almost been a recoil, because there's been so many programs sort of been put in place that have fallen short, right? Or left people wanting. That again, if it is a sort of a plug and play, I think there's a hesitancy towards that. So I like what I'm hearing, and that it's based more on a needs assessment.
I think so. Yeah. Like something like what Forge is doing here, right? Of like real community that you can invite people into who might be further away from the faith, opportunities to actually hear the fundamental gospel message. The reality is, right? Like there's again, 2 conversions that happen in every Catholic's life. There's the conversion to, I want to give my life to Christ completely. And there's many of us even who are, in the habit of being at church and it's part of our life and our identity, our cultural identity, that haven't really made that shift. We haven't had that initial encounter. So how do you help people have that encounter? How do you help them grow then as disciples, and then, experience some sort of formation or at least a desire for mission, and realizing that there's other people that they need to bring to this. So I think pastors thinking around that path to discipleship in their parish, where it's like, we're not just feeding people who are at this stage of faith and kind of talking to them. Even a lot of the people that we think get it don't always get it. And the ones who do get it, I think we're being asked to sort of turn them outward and breathe out on mission. And so I think thinking around some of those principles is really critical.
I'm going to turn this back on you just real quick, because again, you speak with an air of confidence, and I think it's because it's again been your lived experience to take the what I find sometimes difficult in my own life is the balance between inward focus, focusing on myself, and then turning that outward, right? There's not always a healthy tension in my life, right? Where sometimes I can be too introspective, and that cuts me off from relational opportunities. Then other times I'm too outward focused, and then not taking care of myself, so to speak. How do you find, over the course of your life in this work, to the ability to make sense of what between your voice and the Holy Spirit's voice, and how you're supposed to be exercising your baptismal call?
It's a good question. I just had spiritual direction this morning on my way to the airport.
Perfect. And this should be, your answer should be right on the tip of your tongue.
That's exactly what we were talking about, was like how to really allow the Lord's will to be very clear. And, some of the things we were talking about was even just like really learning to love the Lord's will, like actually being fully surrendered in some ways becomes like a precondition for the Lord beginning to speak more clearly in our life, like the extent to which our heart is open and looking for that and even hungering after it in prayer, like God will begin to show up more clearly. For us, the Lord has always worked in discernment in kind of like a pattern. And I think it's different for everyone, like to some extent, but often what he'll do is he'll like draw me deeper. Like he'll draw my attention deeper to him and to certain things around him. And then there'll be like a natural outflowing of that depth of relationship where I start to like, for me, sometimes it even works in like frustration where it's like this thing that like, there's always a certain sense in which maybe if we're noticing something that needs to change, we're being actually invited to be part of the solution there. And I think that's been one of the ways the Lord has worked in me. And then I think scripture has been a huge thing for me, like really being able to locate some of what God is doing in my life through like scripture has been a huge thing, and taking that time. But that's it. It's like, if you want, just for anyone at home, right? Like if you want the Lord to speak to you clearly, you got to be talking to him every day. Yeah. Like if you're not spending 30 minutes plus, even as a lay person, like in scripture, in silence with the Lord, like letting him really drive your heart to conversion and to change and to surrender, it's going to be really hard for you to like hear his voice as he's calling you to different things too, because it is kind of a habit, like where we just start to notice it more. And
I would say even as you get into the busyness of the day, if you haven't taken that time to hear his voice first thing, or it's some dedicated time during the day, that when it does get noisy, he becomes even that much more difficult to hear. Right? Yeah. But when you're rooted in a spiritual life, I speak as with I have some sort of like, perfected practice at this. But.
No, me either. Me first, right? But I think that's right. I think there's a, and we have 4 young kids at home, right? 9 to 1. And I would say that both my wife and I, that's like our biggest frustration at times, is feeling like the Lord is trying to draw us deeper in certain areas. And it's almost like just finding the time for that can be so, so it is a battle, right? Not to be, I don't want to be flippant about that.
Yeah. Just maybe another question or two. And then, but I do think it would benefit myself and the listeners to know, what are the other things besides Amazing Parish, the upcoming pilgrimage that will take place next year. There'll be another pilgrimage that'll make its way from the Midwest out to Los Angeles next spring into early summer. I guess May, right? It's and what are the other things that are giving you hope as we shift away maybe from the negatives, but so many good things are going on, like Forge. There are just a number of apostolates that are really trying to address this broad array of needs that the people of God have, and culture at large, right?
Yeah, I would say the big question for us as a church we should be asking right now is like, Lord, what are you doing and how do we get behind it? So it's clear, right? RCIA numbers were up 40% last year across the United States, 40%.
Des Moines Diocese, by the way, was had the highest rate of increase. We had an 83% increase in Catholics received it last Easter.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
83% is wild, but that's like young male religiosity, right, across the culture is up. There's been talk for a while about, the average age actually of Americans has been falling a while because of what they call deaths of despair, which is like addiction and suicide and different things. Even overdoses went down like dramatically last year. Like there's clearly the Lord is moving in a lot of different ways and in the world to bring about revival and in the church. And so I do think that this is a time to sort of say like, Lord, what are you doing and how do you get behind it? And to me, the lay apostolates have been leading in the United States for 30 years. Yeah, things like Forge is the places where the lightning has been for a very long time. what I would like to see more and more of is the institution, the schools, the parishes, the dioceses start to live like more of those apostolates, who often have sort of an ease and a proclivity toward some of the kind of community and mission that I think should be part of the Christian life. And I would love the institution to begin working with more of those apostolates to learn how to do that.
Is Amazing Parish going to go into schools on the list of places you'd like to be able to help? You know
what? Some of the principals do transfer, right? Of just like health. And we just got a high school in Colorado reached out to us and said, will you coach our leadership team? And we agreed to do it just because we felt called to do it. I don't know if that's going to become a trend, but it is something we're doing a little bit more. Yeah.
Awesome. Tim, thanks again so much. It's been a pleasure to sit down and visit with you and learn a little bit more about you and Amazing Parish. If people want to learn more about your work or Amazing Parish in general, what are the best places to go to get all the information? And who specifically should be, when we're talking about Amazing Parish, who should be reaching out to you? Is that the pastor himself or another church leader?
Church leaders we hear from a lot of staff people are saying, hey, I think our parish would really benefit from this. Certainly at some point we're going to want to talk to the pastor because if he's not bought in, we can't do much. But yeah, timglemkowski.com for me. I just, write and blog and my books are on there and some of the speaking, if you're getting in touch with me, is a place to go there personally. And then amazingparish.org we're actually launching a new website soon. So if you wait a few weeks, you'll see the new version of the website too. And so, yeah, a lot of exciting stuff happening. And we'd love to hear from anybody and figure out how we can help.
Awesome. Well, thanks again so much for your witness of faith and for making time for us here at Iowa Catholic Radio.
Thanks for having me, Deacon.